I think it's interesting. I open these up, and the first one I see is, I want to know why Steve is wearing the bikini in this one. This is odd to me. But, I mean, I get it. You guys have a crazy thing, so it's okay. No big deal. I mean, I would do it. Probably have done it. Anyway, so I'm here today with Lora Sue Schwarzer.
Yes. Yes.
Journeyman bladesmith.
Yes.
Super cool individual.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Good job. So whatever we shoot in here, we're not editing anything at all.
Okay.
So if we say the words that we shouldn't say, they won't cut those out.
Okay.
Sure you will. All right. So what I usually do when we're doing a podcast is we just kind of have fun, and I will sometimes start off talking about how many times you've seen an unidentified flying object. Do you have any accounts of that?
I do not.
Huh.
I do not.
Have you ever seen the Turtle Man?
Yes. I have on TV.
Oh, okay.
On TV, never in
I
person.
don't watch TV. What's the weirdest thing you've seen going from Michigan? What's the monster up in Michigan?
Oh, yeah. I can't think of the name.
Okay, I know one. I know what the weirdest thing you've seen looking out your window. Probably Doc Price out in the lake, buck naked.
Yes, that was the weirdest thing. Yes,
And
that
if you
was
know Doc
definitely.
Price, then you know what we're talking about. So,
Not pretty.
anyway, well, I just wanted us to be able to talk and have a fun time. This is podcast number 580 now. Oh, 8. Oh gosh, it seems like we've been going a long time. Only on number 8, so that's good for me. And you are drinking a red
Merlot.
wine, a Merlot, and I'm drinking a some kind of beer, but it's in a Cumberland Marketing glass because we're here at Cumberland Marketing. And you got some knives. I like to have stuff out on the table. We haven't done this before. To
Okay.
actually have stuff. So are these 2 knives that you've recently completed?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I like these a lot.
Within the last year.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
This is such a nice little size.
Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit about how you got into knives?
Absolutely.
And why you got into knives?
How I got introduced to it, I used to work in a hospital in medical records, and all the doctors came to my office to complete their charts. And I, of course, became friends with most of them. And one of the physicians was Dr. Jim Lucy, an anesthesiologist, who happened to be Bill Skagel's personal physician. And he was forging knives, and I went to watch him forge knives, and it looked fun. So I tried my hand at it and fell in love with it with the first hammer blow to that hot steel. And I think what I liked the most was me physically being able to move steel. To make steel move was just the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And it just blossomed from there.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I used to, before I ever got to do it, I would just imagine, I was like, wow, how's that going to be when I can finally do that? So just for the people who don't know, could you tell who Bill Skagel was?
Bill Skagel, he passed in 1963. His name was real big in the 20s and 30s, and he made the a style of knives with the antler on the end and then the stacked leather and metal spacers, and that was his trademark. Yes, he did other types, solid scales on the handles and wood, ivory, bone, but this was his trademark.
Signature style.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, and
Yeah.
he made a lot for Von Lennerke and Antoine. It was a big business store, and I believe they were out of Chicago. They had big catalogs, and it was, at that time, it was a very expensive store.
Yeah.
And I believe his knives at that time maybe went for $200
Whoa.
out of the catalog, and at that time
In the 20s and
that was a
30s?
lot of
Whoa.
money. So when the Depression hit,
Yeah.
that kind of
went away.
That went away, yeah. And he had some original of those that were marked VL and A,
Yeah.
and still in his possession.
Wow, that's pretty wild. Yeah, I think I'm very fascinated by our history as bladesmiths, and it's important to give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that we talk about, me and Steve talk about, and a lot of others. A lot of the new makers, if you're a new maker and you just started making knives, you've never been to someone's studio, or you've never been, I say studio, or shop, or you've never been to a show, then you don't necessarily know the progression of how you got to be able to be a bladesmith. Because see, you think you just saw someone doing it, but that's not how it got there. There's a long history before you that allowed you to be able to see this. People who are willing to share. Because at one time, people weren't willing to share this information. This was kind of akin to like nuclear physics. You don't talk about it. And you know, the secrets of steel, how to harden it, how to temper it, even what steels to use. You know, back even when I was a kid, the makers that I met were not bladesmiths up until actually I met Steve first and Don Fogg the same day. But they were, you know, they were doing stock removal. All the guys that knew stock removal, and they didn't heat treat their own knives. They sent them off, so they didn't know really anything about the heat treating so much. But that's the cool thing about bladesmithing. We really have to do all of it from the beginning to the end.
Yes.
So, so how did you? What made you decide? It's like I got to keep doing this. You just loved it.
I just loved it.
You wanted to keep moving forward.
Yes. Yeah.
And you learned so your first teacher was Dr. Lucy.
Dr. Lucy was my first teacher, and then I went to the bladesmithing school in Hope, Arkansas, with the American Bladesmith Society.
What year did you go?
That was 96.
96. Who were your classmates? Anybody that is still doing it? Or?
Jim Batson was the instructor.
Yeah.
And let me see. Steve Marshall was in the class. Jim Batson, myself, and Steve Marshall rode every day from the hotel to the class. The three of us rode together in Jim's little teeny tiny baby truck every day.
Yeah.
And Steve Marshall, unfortunately, has passed. And the other guys, I kept in contact with a couple of them for a couple years, but you know, since I haven't seen them. I saw one of them who lived up in Michigan. He had a little get-together at his house about 5 or 6 years after that, and it wasn't until I got there and listened to him that, oh, we were in the class together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
but
funny.
it was fun. But otherwise, I haven't seen anybody.
That was the first time I went to the bladesmithing school. Was that school? I think I had originally signed up to go in like maybe 96 or 98. And maybe it was 97, and I didn't go because Tristan was born that year and I couldn't go. But c'est la vie. So the person in my class that I remember most is Jim Rodabaugh.
Okay.
And we got to be very good friends then. And I remember I showed up, I was wearing overalls, and I think I would wear glasses sometimes then because I had a little bit of, I couldn't see so great in the dark, but I've had that fixed since then by not drinking so much junk food. But Rodabaugh is still, he's a master bladesmith, of course. He lives out in Wyoming. And our instructor was Jay Hendrickson.
Okay.
And we had fun. Jay kind of, he guided us as far as, here's how you make a fire, and here's how you hammer on a knife. Now you boys get at it. So you got 2 weeks to bang on knives. So we did that for 2 weeks. And I would draw a knife, and then I would go forge that knife. And Rodabaugh was like, how are you doing that? Like, I don't know, I'm a sculptor, you know. And then he was making them smooth. I was like, how are you doing that? He's like, oh, let me show you. So we really, I learned more from Rodabaugh, me and him just feeding on each other, than I did from everybody else in the class. So, but it was fun.
Yeah.
So what happened after that? What was after meeting Dr. Batson, whom I dearly love, I wish he could live another 1,000 years.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's told me some crazy stories.
Our class was so much fun. We would, in the morning, we'd have 1 or 2 hours classroom, and he made us take notes. If we were just sitting there listening to him, he'd say, hey, I want to here's some lead hitting that paper. So we had to take notes. And then then he'd give us an outline of the knife that he wanted us to make. And when we first started out, we were making little ones, and I was just banging those out. And he'd say, okay, when Laura Sue gets done with hers, we're moving on.
Cool.
So the first 2, 3, you know, it was guided by me. And then he got into the bigger knives, and then they passed me up because I just didn't have the power that the guys did to do
And
those.
so you
but it
were
was
the
fun.
prettiest student in the class also, I'm assuming.
I was the only female in the class, yes.
Cool. That's cool. But yeah, I like old Dr. B.
Yeah, that's great.
So who was the first other knife make bladesmith that you met, like that we would know, or anybody might out there know, that you'd be like, this person's helping you and showing you stuff?
My husband.
Yeah? Schwarzer?
My husband, Steve Schwarzer.
Yeah, that's cool. So we went to the school. That was I went in February of 2000. And then we went to Batson's Hammer, and then and I already had been writing articles when I was back in high school about Steve,
Right.
Don Fogg, and Jim Schmidt, and all these guys, you know, and George Herron when I was in high school, because you had to write periodical
Right.
review, and I'm only looking at knife magazines or hunting magazines, so I'm writing articles about that kind of stuff. And the first person I met, Steve, super nice to me, right out the kick, very generous and kind. I showed some knives, and everybody's thought I was making knives for a long time, but I've been making them stock removal since the 80s, but I didn't know how to forge until
Right.
then. And met Dr. Basson, Don Fogg. I thought he was floating around on like a Persian rug. He was just kind of floating there, and I think he was talking with Chuck Patrick, and Chuck was going on. Anyway. So that was my first experience at a knife event, and then of course went to Blade Show, ran into more characters like Wade Coulter and Barry Gallagher and Shane Taylor and all those guys. But I think it's cool because some of the people I met first are some of the people I'm still friends with. I can still have a chat with, and we have a good relationship.
Yeah.
So that's the most fun.
That's super. That's the one thing that really surprised me. When I was first forging, and I was thinking, you know, these guys are all going to wonder, what's that dumb old girl trying to do? And it wasn't anything like that. In fact, you know, I was forging away, and I felt somebody staring at me.
Yeah.
And I looked up, and there's a gentleman standing there. He said, "Can I give you a hint?" I went, "Yes, please." And he said, "Put your hammer down." I said, "What?" He said, "When you've got your blade in the fire, lay your hammer down. You're tiring yourself out holding on to your hammer."
Oh yeah.
And I never forgot that. That was just great. And throughout the years, all the other makers, they've all welcomed me with open arms.
Yeah.
And all of them, if you ever need help, call me.
Yeah.
Call me. You know, whatever you have a problem with, let me know, and I'll see what I can do to help you.
Yeah, that's
so it's
cool.
just been great. It's been super.
Very cool. I think I met you. You guys were traveling together. We were going to the Reno show.
Yeah.
And I was in the airport, and I was getting my shoes shined, which I thought was kind of cool. First time I ever got my shoes shined. And then I hopped off that thing, and I went and caught up with the both of you. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was 2002 or 3. It was the first
Something
Reno
like
show,
that.
I think. It was a long time
Yeah,
ago. But
yeah. Might have
Because they had only Master Smith and then select Journeyman
Right,
Smith that they
right.
let in, and I was one of those knuckleheads they had. So that was a fun time. I kind of miss going to that show. That was fun.
It was a fun show.
Yeah. So what's the craziest knife you ever made? Like your most favorite, most difficult knife?
All of those combined into one is the knife that I made for the singer George Strait.
George Strait.
George Strait.
Another legend.
Yes. That one right
Cool.
there. That's the third one that I worked on. The first two I just wasn't happy with, and I wanted it to be absolutely perfect. So it took me 3 times, and I got that one done, and a buddy of mine was his backup singer.
Yeah.
That's how that all came about. And I sent the professional photograph along with the knife, and I asked my buddy if he would have George sign it
Yeah.
and give it back to me, and he did, and he wrote on the picture, to Lora Sue, beautiful work, George Strait.
Cool.
And I have that framed in my hallway.
Oh, that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And then Steve had written an article about that, which was in Blade magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my buddy is Wes Hightower. So
Nice. He's still touring?
he does a lot of backup singing, and to my knowledge, he is the most recorded person in the United States,
Oh,
because
yeah?
he backup sings for
That's cool.
so many
Wes
different.
Hightower, that's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
We have a friend of ours, Journeyman. He works in Nashville. He does sound. He did sound for our Ford series, and he works with a lot of these people. He lives in the old, it's like the old neighborhood where all the country music singers would stay. And we went and visited a couple, I don't know, back before all the craziness started. And he was saying, oh yeah, that's where Loretta Lynn's house was, and this is where Johnny Cash had a place. And I was
That's
like, man, that's
great.
pretty cool. You
Yeah,
know?
it is.
They all lived in the same
Yeah.
neighborhood together. I was like, what a wild party they were going to have.
Yeah, yeah,
That's pretty wild.
cool.
So, what do you like? When I think, sometimes I think back like about obstacles or trouble. Like, so my story's different because I was trying to make a living making knives right out the kick, and I was not going back to doing any of the stuff that I'd done before. I was a professional artist, and that doesn't mean very professional. That just means not making any money artist. And I continued that with knife making for several years. But my grandma was my main financial backer. You know, like she bought me a forge and she bought a hydraulic press, and she kind of funded me to get the ball rolling. So, and you were a nurse.
I worked in medical records.
Medical records.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And-
And so that was my full-time job. So the knives were a hobby.
Okay, that's cool.
And all day at work, I'd be thinking about what I was going to do in the forge when I got home.
Yeah, cool, cool.
yeah.
All right, that's cool.
And the doctors knew that I made knives,
Yeah.
and a handful of them were collectors, and they like knives, and they would run in and show me their latest acquisitions. And
Oh, yeah?
In fact, one day one of the doctors came in with 2 grocery bags full of deer horn.
Oh wow.
And I said, "Where'd you get those?" They said, "I knew one of my patients had them, so I asked him if I could have them for you."
Yeah.
Super.
Cool.
So
That's really cool. I like little knives like that. I will collect knives but I don't think of myself as a knife collector. I did collect skulls at one time. It sounds weird. I had every mammal skull in South Carolina that was still not extinct anyway, and then I had some reptile skulls and stuff. But now I've got a lot of knives. I don't have those anymore. I gave them to a friend of ours at a little museum. But I've got a bunch of knives. But I really like little knives like this. Like if I'm at the blade show and I see one, I'm like, "Ooh, I gotta have that. That's so cool." So what was your first knife show experience? Like the first time you
Blade
went
show.
to a show? What year was that?
1996.
96.
96.
It was in
And
Atlanta.
It was in Atlanta,
Yeah.
and now where it's in the big convention center. Back then, it was in the hotel itself. When you go up the escalators, there's that big flat area.
Yeah,
That's where the show was.
that's right.
And it was, even then, it was, oh my goodness, this is so big.
Yeah.
And now it looks like, you know, it would have 10 tables in it.
So how did that go?
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. I met a bunch of people there.
Do you
Or I
remember
was
who
introduced.
You were next to? Like your tables?
No,
No.
I don't. Mm-mm.
That's cool. I remember my first blade show that I took knives to sell was 2001.
Okay.
And I had about 15 knives. And Friday, I'd sold about half of them, and Saturday, I'd sold the rest of them. And Barry Gallagher and Wade Coulter came to my table. And I knew who Wade was. I didn't know who Barry was. And they were like, yeah, they're looking at my knives, and they're like, we're going to have you killed. We just want to let you know you're going to die probably before Sunday when the show's over. So have a nice day.
Right.
And they left. I'm like, what was that about? You know? And then they had actually, they liked me, so that's why they were messing with me. They had sent people to come look at my knives, and I think that had something to do with getting exposure, and people coming and seeing my work and buying my knives. So
Right.
that's always been fun. I went every year to Blade Show since when did we? You know, like when we started visiting just to go.
Yeah.
I think 97 year Tristan was born was the first year we went to it, and we never missed a year up until, excuse me, year before last. And then unfortunately this year,
Right.
but understandably,
Right.
good call. You know, they tried to postpone it.
Right.
Turns out couldn't totally understand. So, you know, we support
Absolutely.
Alicia 1,000%.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
She's the Blade Show director. We had a podcast in here with Alicia, and you know, that's just the way it goes. We're not going to have it. Okay, we'll have a better knife show next year. 2001
Yes.
will be the biggest
It'll
blade
be a-
show ever.
It'll be great.
It'll be great. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Absolutely.
So when was the first time you made Damascus?
Probably 2000, 2001.
Really, gosh, got me beat on all these little things. So did you make Damascus? Who'd you make Damascus? Steve?
Yes.
Oh, good.
I took a class down at the school,
Yeah.
and it was Steve Dunn was the instructor, and Dickie Robinson was his assistant. That was a class.
I bet it was.
But that was when I made my first Damascus,
Oh.
and then I worked with Steve on it.
So
after that.
were you working in the coal then?
No.
Oh, you had
No,
gas?
I worked gas.
Oh, wow.
And even in my introduction course,
Yeah.
I worked gas because Jim Batson had made me a little forge. I had met him previous
Yeah.
because he had made a forge for Dr. Lucy. So he made one for me also.
Oh, cool.
So he knew I knew how to use gas.
Yeah.
So he put me on the gas.
Wow.
And there were 2 days he made everybody work in coal.
Yeah. This is the most recent knife you made?
Yes, yes.
Tell me about that one.
This one, it's huge. It's
Huge.
Huge. It's about 15 inches from the tip to the end of the handle. And it's about this wide. And polishing it was like polishing a football field.
Oh, yeah.
It's big. But it has made its way to its new owner, and it's very happy with it.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Very cool.
It's just
You got
very big.
bronze, copper. What's the silvery one? Is that nickel
silver.
or aluminum?
Silver.
Silver. Okay.
Yeah.
And he would use like a coin or something, wouldn't he?
Sometimes.
The silver
Sometimes,
coin
yeah.
was worth in 1920 was
Right.
$1.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
interesting. That's cool. That's cool. One of the things that I tell people all the time is I encourage folks when they start making and they can, when you overcome the obstacle of understanding like, hey, I know how to make a knife, I know how to make it sharp, and I know how to get my heat treat right, and you can, you can do your fits and finishes and all that. Settle on a style you like and make that style, and don't let anyone tell you to not to.
Right.
Make
Right.
what you want to make. Of course, challenge yourself all the time, but I'm big about making what I want to make. I've made a bunch of stuff. There's certain knives that I don't care to make, I don't want to make anymore, and I more than likely won't make them. And there's other things I really enjoy. I like making like choppers, and I like to make swords sometimes, and I like making I've been on this little like taking the knives, the OSS knives, are you familiar, like from World War II?
Yeah, yeah.
That were in the OSS kit, and like making my versions of them. I like those, but now those,
fun.
I'm not making like a custom one. I'm putting them into production.
Right.
Because I think they're neat. So what's your favorite knife to make?
I like the small hunter size, about like this. This is my favorite, my most favorite size to make, like
Yeah.
this. And this was a first. It's seeing right now the Brute de Forge is kind of real popular.
Yeah.
I thought, well, I'll make a Skagel-esque
Yeah.
Brute de Forge.
Cool.
So that's what this one is.
Yeah, I like that. I always like, it's kind of funny, I would finish knives and make them real crispy clean and all that kind of stuff. And you tell someone, oh, I forged that. And like, I don't see any marks on it. I don't see any forge marks on it. So, I don't know. My thing for doing the Brute de Forge, me and Adam DeRozers, about 2004 or 5, I think, we were getting these Gransford Brooks axes. I was a dealer for them because I was trying to supplement. I'd have knives, I'd sell them knives, and I could sell some axes
Right.
or whatever. But they had all the forging left on them, and it was totally acceptable. I'm like, why not do that? And then Daniel Winkler had been doing it, of course.
Sure.
And Joe Keezer had
Yeah.
been doing some, and So me and Adam started doing them, and they were crazy popular right off the kick.
Yeah.
And what I did, instead of making them less expensive, I made my clean knives more expensive, and I just put those in their place. And basically, me and Adam came up with a way to say exhibition grade was hand sanded, and then safari grade was belt finish, and then adventure grade was the brute de force, which we called adventure grade, and it
That's
was
great.
wildly popular. We had a lot of fun doing that.
That's
And
great.
it got me through some lean times because
Yeah.
I could make one in a decent amount of time
Oh,
and get it
sure.
out to people, and
Yeah.
still do. I still love doing them. You know, we teach classes on them, forging something to as close as possible, and then having to basically just sharpen it is way easier than taking a big chunk and grinding it to nothing. Now I say it's easier. I've seen people who, and you have too, they just can't do it.
Right, right.
It's not easier. It's easier to teach forging than it is to teach grinding.
Yes.
Grinding is like writing
And
in calligraphy. It takes practice. Like playing a guitar, it takes practice.
Yes, and it's easier to learn how to forge than it is to learn how to grind.
Yes.
I took a class, it was a lab class down at the school, and it was each student could work on whatever they were having problems with, and mine was grinding.
Yeah.
I was just scared of the grinders.
Yeah.
And it was Monday through Friday class, and it wasn't until Wednesday that I really started to feel comfortable using the grinder. And then after that, it was, grinders are our friends. We got along after that.
I feel like I learned the hard way about what that grinder would do to me.
Oh.
I had no clue. The only bone I ever broke was from that stupid grinder. I got my finger caught in the.
Oh no.
I would trip around the rotary platen one time and broke that pinky finger. But yeah, I've had to grab knives and stick them in my leg and all kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
The thing I'm most hesitant to play with in the shop is the buffer.
Oh.
I just don't. I don't.
Anymore, the only thing that I would ever buff on my handles would be the guard. And anymore, I don't even do that. I take it to 8,000 hand rubbed finish,
Wow.
and I really don't need the buffer anymore.
8,000.
I take the
Toilet paper is about 8,000.
Oh.
Polish that, and what you're seeing is never been above.
Yeah, that's
No.
cool. That's
Yeah.
impressive.
And
That's nice.
the blades I normally take to 1,500 to 2,000
Yeah.
grit finish.
Very nice. I do all kind of crazy stuff, which I'm not divulged to be able to tell you about. So, besides Steve, could you think about some other characters in the bladesmithing community that you'd be like, that guy or that girl or whoever? There's not a lot of girls.
I gotta
Tiger
say, Tiger Lily and Delana
Delana,
is
yeah, I like
amazing. When I took my first master cutting test,
Yeah.
she was there supporting me the whole time.
Yeah.
She was, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, and she was wonderful. And
Yeah. Oh, do they
she's
live
just-
in West Virginia again, or her and Van
Yeah.
still living out? Okay, I thought they lived in Nevada for a while, but
yeah.
there was a conversation happening one time. This guy was talking about his Harley Davidson and how he rode it from somewhere in Savannah. He rode it to the Blade Show, and Delana's like, yeah, that's cool. I rode mine all the way across the country and back, and all the way across Canada and down to
Right.
Mexico and back. He was like, oh, well, okay. So, I was like, pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's another character. I
Oh,
like her
she's
a lot.
great. Yeah, and some of the other instructors that I've had when I took classes at the school, Jerry Fisk, Roger Massey, Steve Dunn, Dickie Robinson, Roger Massey, and then other people that have given me just a little extra shove,
Yeah.
Harvey Dean and Roger Green.
Roger Green, huh?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. He was
Yeah.
just a little extra. Okay, this is
Yeah.
try this or do that, and
That's right.
just great. And back in Michigan, Jerry Van Eisinga, he's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I love him. He's great.
And every weekend he opens his shop, and makers can come and work in his shop, and
Yeah.
he helps them along. So
Yeah,
it's
he's
just
a
great.
good
Yeah.
dude. I really
He
like
is,
him
yeah.
from the first time I met him. We had a table I think the DeRozers have it now, but he was like down one from me back then, and that's when I met him, 2006 or 7 or something like that at the Blade Show. But yeah, I've always liked him. He's a real cool guy.
Yeah.
So for me, I went to the school a couple times, and I took a folder making class with Wade Coulter. And it may have been one of the only classes he ever taught. But one of the things he had was cool. He had an old chamber pot, and that was his molten salt bath. And literally, it was like an old, a poop hand. That was it, molten salt. And I was terrified of it. He goes, yeah, don't get a drop of sweat and it'll explode. And I was like, okay. I had no idea. It was tough. Anything that's unknown, I'm like, I don't even know what's going to happen here.
Right.
What could happen? But it's funny how, when I think about it, like how from the time you start until where you are now, always learning something new. And then I think I was like, gosh, I used to do this. And although it wasn't necessarily the best way to do it, it worked. I never got none of those knives back. No one ever damaged them, sent them back to me. I mean, I had people send me back knives for stupid reasons, like I cleaned a bear or 2 bears. I stuck the knife back in the sheath all bloody, and I couldn't even get it out. It was rusted in there, but stuff like that, that's acceptable. But whatever I was doing right, I guess it was right enough that it outweighed the wrong in the knife. So I've never received one back with that kind of damage. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So George Strait is that like the most famous person you ever met?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Definitely. Yeah.
Cool. And
Yeah.
I don't know
It's
who's
very
got my
fun.
knives, but I think it's interesting who's interested in knives.
Right. Right.
And where they end up going and what happens with them.
About
So.
2 years ago, I had a gentleman call me, and he said he had gotten about 3 or 4 of my knives at an auction. And it was really interesting because I remembered each one of them. And at that time, I was making a Provenance to go with them.
Yeah.
And he had only one of them. So I was able to find, my original copies and remake those for him. And in fact,
Did you take a picture of every knife you've made?
yes,
Oh, wow.
yes.
How many knives? Do you know how many?
Not right out. I've not
A
counted
lot.
them,
This book
but-
is filled.
Yeah, but this is the knife that he purchased for me when he called me.
Nice.
And that was pictured before it was finished. It was pictured in Blade magazine.
Cool. I like that style sheath. Pretty cool.
Thank you.
Old school, cool. Yep. One of the neat things too about this style is it could fit into any timeline, and
Yes.
it's always neat to me to see knives. And I like all kind of crazy stuff. I like the modern knives. I like the ones like It's so. A lot of makers will look at things and go, "Well, I don't do what you do. I just do stock removal." I go, "Oh yeah. Well, how do you know what I do?" And so I make knives by forging. I make knives by grinding. And I think a lot of times people don't know that if you forge knives, you still have to grind them,
Yes,
especially
you
to get
do.
nice finishes on them or Damascus.
Yes.
But I also have other people make stuff for me, and they'll use a 5-axis mill or whatever, and lasers, and every different kind of way that they can be made. I'm trying to make them because I've learned that if you don't build a team and you don't have facets to what you're doing, it's going to be very difficult if one of those little panes of glass gets broken. And you have to have another, so I say facets. So I think of it as a multifaceted gem, like a sapphire.
Right.
That's
right.
what I like to
Or
think
diamond.
of it as. Diamond,
Yeah.
But I think it's cool that you have this Provenance book. Shelley made us one too, but I don't keep up with taking photos. So I guess I should have done better I should have done what you did here.
And one thing that you were talking about earlier with the sticking to a style, in doing that, sometimes you can get just kind of burn out on that style.
Yeah.
Try something else.
Try something
Try
else.
something else. You might like it, and let's go back and forth. Or I really don't like that. I'm going to go back to what I know and really enjoy. But I just needed a break to do something else for a little bit. I tried that at one point, and
What was
I've gone back.
what did you try that you were like, yeah, this ain't really for me?
Just some slab handled, just some little ones. They were fun, but you know, they weren't real intricate or anything, but they just had a little slab handle, and it was, oh, these are fun, this is cute, but I want to go back to to my original ones.
I think it's a good idea. I encourage people to try every kind of knife they can try, of course, but also to very much make what you want to make. And I like to encourage people to do this because they love to do it, because it's an art, should be preserved.
Right.
And we definitely need to do this for the posterity. you know.
Right.
But I remember one of my Journeyman Smith knives I thought was a Samuel Bell Bowie. That's kind of weird that they would even say Samuel Bell and Bowie in the same sentence. That kind of doesn't make any sense when you see that the biggest one there ever was about this big. And I saw a Samuel Bell, this was this big, so I made one this big, because that's how big I thought it was.
Right.
That means it was definitely in proportion, but for who, I don't know. But, I mean, cool, but I ground them on both sides, and I had Fuller on both sides and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, after that, I kind of abandoned the whole antique Bowie knife thing. And I know people love them, and I got nothing against them. The American ones I always liked, but the English style ones, I feel like, now this is very controversial, but I feel like the English style Bowie knives are kind of like gas station knives. Like you go in a gas station and you see these shiny knives, and they're like, oh, they're cool, but maybe they're not very good, because some of those knives, they'd make them have a tang on them like that long.
Right.
Because steel is expensive, but or they'd have a cardboard sheath or something. But it's just my thing. So, do you have any knives like you don't like? When you see one, you're just like, oh gosh, I hate seeing that.
There's been a couple that I really didn't enjoy doing.
Yeah.
But I did them and was really relieved when I got through with them and moved on to the next one.
Yeah.
But then there's the few that, if I'd had a bad day at work or something, and I put, say, that doctor's name on that piece of steel, it just forged out so perfectly and so quickly. And it was, okay, I feel better about them now.
That's cool.
But it was,
I think my least favorite knives were the ones that a customer would say, I want you to make a knife like this, and
yes,
this.
exactly.
And so I'd make that knife, and they go, that's not what I wanted. I'm like, that's exactly what we drew.
Right.
I mean, to a T, exactly. No, I don't like that. And so you know what I never did again? That.
Yeah.
I know what you like. You don't know what you like. I know what you like.
Right.
So,
You will like this one.
you really like this one, yeah. But I think that's fun. And what else would you want to say?
Something I think is really important, and I've just going through archives of Steve's work. Take a few minutes or a few hours, research, go through history. If you like a certain style of knife, research it. See who's done it before, how they did it, when it was popular. So much history is forgotten, and it's so important to keep that history alive and to learn who worked on that style. That style been around since the beginning of time, or is it something brand new?
Yeah, something showed up and became popular.
Right.
Yeah, that's true too.
And it was interesting going back through that. I heard a woman bladesmith, and she just did stock removal. I'd never heard of her before, and I found 2 or 3 magazines that she had been written up in, and I went back and researched her a bit, and she passed within the last 10 years or so. And I thought, oh, it's so sad. I would have liked to have known more about her, but because she was, I guess, real popular in the 70s.
Yeah.
But it was real interesting.
Oh, that's cool.
And I just learned a lot going through that history, and
it's important to remember where things came from. Yeah, very good. I base a lot of my hunting knives and choppers. I base on my experience growing up in South Carolina in the swamp, hunting deer and just clearing trails and stuff like that. It's great. I love doing those things. Those are great things. And so when I'm making a knife, my knife has experience behind it. the hardest knives for me to make, I think, are the most difficult ones are kitchen knives. You know what's easiest knife to make is a fighter. You know, I call them they're for fighting poverty.
Right.
'Cause what do you fight with this? Poverty and goblins and stuff like that. Well, I appreciate your contribution to
Thank you.
bladesmithing.
Thank you.
And being a woman and sticking in there with it, with all these crazy, stinky men, and continuing on and staying in the game. That's another thing I've noticed over the years. People come and go.
Yeah.
But ever since I met you, you've never stopped doing it. Steve's never stopped.
No.
I never stopped. We'll continue on.
Yeah, I slowed down for a few years, but I'm back in the saddle.
Back
so,
in the saddle.
yeah.
That's right. Well, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Laura
Thank
Sue,
you.
for being
I
here.
appreciate it. I appreciate it.
I think we
Thank
had
you.
fun.
Absolutely.
And I am happy to share you with everybody out there
Thank
who is
you.
willing to have a listen. So-
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
So remember to subscribe, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, and if you're not on our Patreon yet, go over there and be on Patreon. That way you get to see this first before everybody else does. So thank you. Bye.